So welcome. Thank you. This is the one of our expert interviews around character strengths and virtues and how they can apply to storytelling, in particular, storytelling for adolescents. These expert interviews will be part of a toolkit for storytellers where we will be talking about how you can take the evidence-based, research-based on these character strengths and apply them to your storytelling in an organic way. And we're also looking at the intersectionality, so how these character strengths might differ for different groups and different marginalized identities, which research has shown. Things like, for example, curiosity, where, you would think, oh, well, that's good for everybody. But if a Black boy is curious in their neighborhood or in a new neighborhood, they might not be able to express curiosity in the same way as white kids. So my name is Dr. Yalda T. Uhls. I'm a former movie executive. I worked with Janet Yang when I was in the film business, and I'm honored to be a longtime friend and collaborator with her. I then got a PhD in developmental psychology, studying how media impacts kids. So give you guys each a second to introduce yourself. Janet, will you introduce yourself?
Okay. Well, as you mentioned, I have been for a couple of decades a film producer. Recently, I took on another position, which was president of the Academy of Motion Pictures Arts and Sciences.
Wow.
So that's I think, a good summary.
And how about you, Dr. Keltner? Would you like to be Dr. Keltner or Dash?
No. Dacher.
Dacher.
Yeah, thank you. And what an honor to be with you, Janet. And thank you, Yalda. I am Dacher Keltner. I'm a professor of psychology at UC Berkeley, and I run the Greater Good Science Center, help run it. And really, in science and then getting out in the world, I'm interested in how, what you might think of as the moral emotions, the moral sentiments, the deep roots of virtue, like awe and humility and courage, a sense of justice, guide us to better societies.
So I'm curious, and just for the lay people out there, in the academic world, there is this delineation between moral character strengths and life skills.
Yeah.
In the lay world, people don't think that way. They
Right.
just think, character strengths. And frankly, you use the word character in storytelling, and it's actually a character in the show or in the movie. So could you talk a little bit about what that means and why it's important to delineate more life skills that are quite, you practice, you learn, you probably practice them all, but also these moral character strengths?
Yeah, and I'm really eager to hear what Janet thinks about the role of art and film in cultivating character and morality. So, there is the realm of everyday social behavior and just, being a healthy individual, which is life skills, right? What are my sleep habits? What's my diet like? Do I exercise? Do I get to things on time? And those are just fundamental life skills that are really important for the fabric of society, right? Just to stay healthy and be a civil citizen in the world. And then there's this realm that philosophers have long pulled apart, which is kind of our deep moral intuitions, right? Our feelings about this is unjust and I feel outraged, right? Women don't get paid enough. Biases against Asian Americans in many different sectors of society. I've done a lot of work on the fundamental structure of compassion and caring, that, we have a deeply wired tendency to care for people in need. And then more recently, awe, which is this emotion, this moral emotion of how do I connect to larger things than me, right? Be it a culture, a musical tradition, a religious group, a political group. And so there's a lot of scholarship that says, like, we've got to master those life skills. Those are really important. But we also have to learn a lot about what our fundamental moral concerns are in the world and take action.
Yeah, that's a perfect way to think about it. I do think lay people sort of think values maybe for that. And perhaps that's a word we should use as we're talking to lay people, especially with this mix of character that in storytelling has various meanings. So you already asked the question that I was going to ask, Janet, and I'm curious too. how do you integrate these kinds of values and also possibly life skills, which, Dacher talked about, into storytelling, and why is it important?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Well, I'm so happy to have this conversation, honestly, because it's a conversation that I'm often having with myself and not with others. I think many of us bring our morals, ethics into our work, but it
Yeah.
somehow is not placed front and center of any conversation we have in the creative community. To some degree, it's always, well, this character would make this choice over that choice. I know the power of storytelling. I've seen it in my own life. I've seen radical changes that have occurred within different communities and in society because of certain kinds of representation. But
Yeah.
I truly would like there to be, for not just our industry, but for society as a whole, for our entire global community, for ethics, morals, spirituality to be not so covert,
I
for
agree.
us to be able to talk about this. I do feel like there's a spiritual vacuum in our society right now. We're seeing a lot of the effects of it.
Yeah.
And one of the things that really keeps me going in my profession is that I know storytelling does make a difference. It's often a very, very tough road to get that thing made. And you kind of wonder at times, do the means justify the ends, or the ends justify the means, or whichever, we're challenged constantly. And I think one of the challenges is the pre-existing notion of what people want to see, and why they want to see things is generally, it has to just be entertaining first and foremost. I truly believe that if somebody were to ask me today, what is your goal in life? Because I've had many different ones, and I have to say some of them have been achieved. I would say my goal on a very big abstract level is for goodness to win.
Yeah.
Whether it be on a daily basis, the people that we work with in the industry or society as a whole, again, just I don't want there to be, because there has been plenty of examples of bad behavior
Yeah.
being successful.
Yeah.
And I don't know why this is the case. And that's true on screen as well as off screen. And I feel like this is a battle that we're constantly fighting. Do you have to be a son of a bitch to get success? And I like to think that one doesn't. And I do see there are changes now,
Yeah.
and it's not okay. And that is, I'm sure in part the result of social media calling people out and whatever. And we have to be careful of that as well. But I'm just saying, and with education, where are children learning about
Yeah.
integrity
Yeah.
and values and just human kindness? Is that being taught? And I feel that so many other things that we're focused on are dancing around this, because we're talking about, gun control, very important. But what is causing people to commit violence? That to me is extremely important. And why is there such a homelessness issue and mental
Yeah.
health
Yeah.
crisis? And I don't think we're getting to the root of what the issues are. We're looking at the superficial symptoms. And so storytelling to me is a very effective way to present some of these issues in a way that is still entertaining. In other words, people want to go not because they're eating medicine, but because they think they're going to learn something. It's not always haha fun and games, but you feel like somehow your body chemistry is changed a little bit, your perception or something. When you watch a really good movie or a television show, there's a level of relatability with the characters that shifts something. And that's what I always strive for anyway.
You
I
do,
have
and
to I have to ask Janet a question.
go ahead.
And I could not agree more. I think we've been in this period of 30 to 40 years where a lot of people in entertainment or the academy or sciences have shied away from the word moral or character because we don't want to sound preachy, and maybe that was what religion was supposed to do. And we now know young people are moving away from religion, for better and worse. And there's a really emerging new science that says that young people learn a lot about character and a sense of justice or morality or caring through art. even though art it's supposed to be just, it's just about beauty or pleasure or what have you, but they learn fundamental things about their character from what music they like, a film.
Completely.
I was lucky to learn, my mom taught literature at a state university, and I learned a lot from literature. And I'm curious how that idea translates to your work.
Oh, no, if it weren't for that, which we have just a basic faith in and intuitive understanding of, I
Yeah.
don't think many of us would be doing this.
Right.
I think that's
True.
the hidden, unspoken part of what we do. I mean, I was just this morning having a conversation about the Taylor Swift phenomenon. I mean, she is about to, her concert movie is about to fill screens all across the country. And she is an icon because people
Yeah.
really relate to her, and she's providing moral guidance to young women, especially everywhere. She's providing a way of seeing the world, of empowering young women. Barbie did the same thing. So I'm just using those examples because they're fresh in my mind. People are hungry, I think, for these, I don't even know what to call them anymore because they're not really icons. We were actually having, I don't know if it's controversial, but comparing Taylor Swift to Beyonce. Beyonce seems like someone that is so much on a pedestal, but you can't, a little bit maybe unreachable. She's so amazing and perfect, but somehow Taylor feels like you and me, right?
And Olivia
That's
Rodrigo too, right? I mean, she's another, Olivia Rodrigo. And speaking of that, and I'd like to talk about shifts in generations, because I do believe adolescence, I was talking about Madonna was the Taylor Swift and was so different than Taylor Swift and Olivia Rodrigo. This generation, in one study, we found that very few of US teens chose being rich as a core value.
Wow.
In fact, what they chose, only 10%. In fact, what they chose was having close friends and being involved in your community. So this generation actually strives for this, cares about this. We have a Teens and Screens report that will come out in about 3 weeks. We're really finding they don't want to see aspirational content. They want to see movies and shows with hope, and they want to see movies and shows that they can relate to. That's always been true.
I like to think that's the case, and that I will finally feel in sync with the times. However, I also know that many, many, many young people aspire to be influencers.
Yes,
And
absolutely,
that
they
is
do.
very, and maybe that's related. Maybe they want to be influencers because they want to share their sensibilities. But I also think a lot of people just want to be influencers because they're very,
to be
they want
famous
the
and money,
popularity.
for sure. But this was a nationwide survey, and really, there are a lot of kids that want to be influencers and talk about it, and it is completely a career path that is viable for them. But in fact, one of my daughter's good friends from college is a successful TikToker. But
on the subject of not wanting the money, I think I'm really glad to see, because I think what has been the single most disheartening trend that we've seen in the society recently is greed.
I
think the
agree.
greed, what we're seeing
the
happening in
adults are
Silicon
modeling it.
Valley, and what has affected Hollywood so much, a whole different level of greed, because a whole different level of a kind of wealth that is possible. We just came out of the writer's strike, and when CEOs are making 500, 1,000 times more than other workers,
Preposterous.
this is not just in our industry; it's everywhere. The disparity of wealth is truly
so
horrifying.
And I think that's part of the reason this generation is shifting, because they have that information now. But I'm curious, Dacher, have you seen shifts amongst the different generations? You started studying this many years ago. What do you see as a shift with this younger generation?
Yeah, no, I think we're, and I've taught human happiness for 30 years at Berkeley, and then online to larger audiences. And, we have lived through this 30-year, beginning with Reagan, and the data align with this, like, period of greed, and just the Wall Street, the famous film, Greed is Good, Gordon Gekko, right? And that idea was crystallized that generation that I was part of, regrettably, of like, go make money, new Wall Street commodities, as Janet said, new kinds of wealth, inequality. And the younger people have seen the costs of that. The consumerism is a misguided path to well-being, as is materialism. It undermines it. It costs our planet. And they also see the loneliness that Vivek Murthy, our Surgeon General, has observed. That's why you're finding so telling. Like, they want communities that revolve around character and virtues and morals and pleasures that you get from arts and the like. And so it's a real interesting moment culturally that we are really shifting out of that, and we'll see where we land. It's a real inflection point in our history.
Janet, do you think that people in the industry recognize that and value what Gen Z is saying they're interested in and want, and trying to meet that? I mean, obviously we have Barbie, which was great. And Taylor Swift and Olivia Rodrigo are really representing these kinds of things. But what do we have to do to get others to think that way and to be more open to integrating these kinds of values into their content?
Well, I can't speak for the whole industry, but I would say that there's a lot of data research that is always being done, and clearly people want to reach a younger generation. And I've read certain studies myself. I think people are slow to change in some ways. I mean, this was the year that all of a sudden every sequel didn't work. I mean, it's kind of astounding and wonderful. I mean, it was literally overnight. So we had, I don't even need to enumerate them all, but easily 6, 8 sequels to very beloved franchises that just bombed. And I think this is very telling. And I think, in general, again, because we live in a capitalist society, so the corporations are following the money. And when you spend $250 million on a movie and it, barely makes 20 or whatever it is, I'm just randomly citing figures, that's a wake-up call. That's a very big wake-up call. So people, again, we're still economically driven. But the data supports a shift away from that kind of thing, and probably more fresh and original voices, and ones that really speak to youth and where they are. That's really encouraging. I mean,
that is encouraging.
get depressed reading the news every day, and I have to kind of stay away, but I appreciate that we're looking at the silver lining to the cloud, because I think maybe things had to get so extreme for us to reprioritize our values. And perhaps that is happening, and perhaps it's happening with the youth. I'd like to believe that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting you say that. And I definitely want to see if you have data that you can show me about. I'm sure there's some article about the sequels and franchises, because, and I'm giving it to you guys first, and this will be published after Teens and Screens. We asked them what they were interested in: original content based on IP, franchises, sequels. And as you said, that was not what they wanted to see. They want original content. So it's great, because sometimes people say, oh, they say they want that, but they don't do it. So it's great to have data that actually reflects what the kids are saying they want.
I think the traditional studios have been doing things for a long time in a way that gave them a lot of success, and it's just not working anymore. I think they got into a certain habit, and a lot really has to do with social media. So we all know the assets and liabilities of social media, but people are finding their own voice. And when in the olden days, the studios would blast advertising out into the world, spend a lot of money, and somehow you just couldn't help but get sucked into the narrative of like, gotta go see. The fantastic thing that happened this year with Barbenheimer is this was a total grassroots marketing campaign. It did not emanate from the distributors, but from the people. these two movies opening the same weekend. They're like, okay, gotta see them both the same day, one after the other. People were literally talking about which
My
one are you going
child
to see
did
first,
that.
first. So this kind of thing is very powerful, and I'm sure a lot of great minds are dissecting all of this and going,
Oh
what?
yeah, we're
So,
doing the research, right, Dr.
yeah.
Keltner? So, Doctor, you talked about compassion, and compassion as a way to also open yourself up to other cultures.
Yeah.
We looked at curiosity, being
Yeah.
curious about other cultures, humility, being humble about your own self and open to others, and gratitude, being grateful for privilege. How do you think compassion can apply to storytelling and also help us recognize other people? I mean, we are, after George Floyd, culture
Yeah.
shifted, but
Yeah.
it's also kind of going back all over and including the industry. So how do we use compassion? And I would love to hear Janet's take too after we hear from Dr. In content to open people's minds.
Yeah, so I approach this from this perspective that says, as I stated earlier, we have these really deeply human tendencies towards the character strengths and the morals of compassion and awe and gratitude, being reverential for things that are given to us. And as Karen Armstrong, the religious historian, has argued, compassion may be the deepest, right, or the most fundamental, just caring for people in need and sacrificing to benefit them. We know a lot about its neurophysiology, and our lab looks at art, music, visual art, storytelling as these are hundreds of thousands of years old. These are just deep human tendencies to codify what's good about human beings and then to share in a powerful way, right? So, compassion, a lot of people are finding, is fundamental to the great stories of life, right? From Greek myths to indigenous myths to great novels, there are always moments of compassion that are transformative. And, as a young adolescent, you're like, oh, that's how I feel it, right? In this beautiful form. And to Janet's point, like, we need to move away from the media that say that badness wins, because it doesn't. There are a lot of data that suggest otherwise. And really, as a lot of media scientists like you, Yalda, are showing, like, people want this. They want these moving stories, the Schindler's List and the like. So I think it's a fundamental priority in our art world is compassion, and we lose sight of it.
Yeah. Janet, I mean, you have been at the forefront. I remember the movie I connected with you on was Johnny Spain, which was
yeah.
a really interesting.
Made yet one of these days.
Someday, it's a great story. And my
Yeah.
very first movie I ever got made, which was at New Line, was Mi Familia, My Family. You have been at the forefront of thinking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and multicultural content, and really have been a leader at making the Academy, Motion Picture Academy, take this more seriously. Can you see an intersection between these character strengths and values and these different groups, marginalized communities, and how is that shifting in the industry?
Oh, there's been huge shifts. So in my little bubble, when it comes to things like diversity and equity inclusion, there really have been huge strides. And we've seen it again on screen and off screen, just within our board at the Academy. It's a giant shift. We now have more women than men. We have quite a few people of color. So when change happens, I love the book Sapiens by Harari. And he talks about how things will just kind of muddle along a certain way just because we want to believe what others around us believe. But at a certain point, there's a critical mass of people who are ready for a change. And when change happens, it can happen very, very quickly. And I think on the subject, and you mentioned the word transformative, Dacher, sorry. That's what we always look for in our characters in storytelling, is transformation. And I very much believe in the Buddhist principles of impermanence. We are always changing. What people like to see. Why do we even tell these stories? What makes for a good story? If you read Joseph Campbell, whatever, it's a hero's journey. It's the story of transformation, and we are capable of change. And that is, I think, what gives us hope. We're always moving. We're never the same. Nothing stays the same. So I think being able to see, and often what's at the heart of this transformation is a kind of recognition of some compassion or redemption. There's a light bulb that goes off. It is, in a way, a spiritual journey. Something happens, and something clicks and allows you to see things in a different way, and then that becomes a transformation. And it's a really powerful and beautiful thing that we experience on a daily basis, but don't quite usually articulate. I'm very curious, Dacher, in your work, and I will have to do some more research on it. But I do feel this is the most important thing that can permeate, and it's happening. People are teaching meditation in classrooms, and there's discussions of this, but I feel like we're sometimes missing the forest for the trees, and really it's a very fundamental thing. I think people are a little scared of talking about things that are so big and abstract. But for me and for others I know, it is really at a foundational level, an important component.
Absolutely.
No, and it builds on Yalda's question, when you think about the power of film and the scale to elicit an emotion like compassion, right, or awe. And those emotions, to Yalda's comment, they transform how we look at humanity. We no longer divide people as much. We don't polarize. We recognize the needs and injustices in society. I remember being, I think, 18 and seeing the film Gandhi. And I'd kind of heard abstractly like who Gandhi is, okay, and it just suddenly was like, oh, this is social justice, right? This is about inequality and transformation. And I just got goosebumps thinking about the film. And that's how, to surface these notions and powers of art, I think is, you guys are doing it. And thank you, Janet, for changing the industry. But it's something that young people need to be reflecting on in their consumption of art. It's like, oh, how is this guiding me morally? How does this tell me what kind of community I want to be part of? Because the lessons are there in the power of story. So
I love that. And that is why the Center for Scholars and Storytellers exists, is to bring together people like you, both people working within your own fields to shape and support the next generation through whatever medium you have. One last question, because I want to be mindful of time. And you can sort of fold in, I'm going to ask you two, but the first question is, you can fold in the second if you want, and we'll start with Dacher and with you, Janet. So you have a minute to think about it. Well, you just talked about it. Did you come across a particular story or type of media during your youth that strongly portrayed positive character virtues and played a significant role in shaping your development as a young person? I guess you just said it, Gandhi, but maybe there's another. And then what recommendations do you have for today's storytellers as they think about incorporating these values into their stories? And we just have a couple more minutes. So if each of you could just answer for about a minute, and then we'll sign off.
Yeah, I was lucky to be raised by a visual artist, my dad, and then my mom taught literature at Cal State Sacramento. And, that's where I learned about character, is in art. And I learned it in paintings like Goya, horror and destruction. I learned it in literature early on, reading the brothers Karamazov and Alyosha, his kind of, I'm not a religious person, but his Christ-like devotion. Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse, and just like the idea of humility in that character. And films, I grew up part of my time in Laurel Canyon in the late 60s, and films were statements about what is just and injustice, All the President's Men. It's just like, wow, injustice in politics, the abuse of power. And my advice for storytellers is to return to awe. I've spent 15 years studying this emotion. It's like Einstein said, it's this source of art and science, just being amazed at things that are bigger than ourselves. And that's what we need.
And that ties to humility too.
Yeah, very much so.
And curiosity, frankly.
Yeah.
And gratitude.
And our best ways to make people feel awe are art. It turns out we've been doing it for a long time, and let's return
Please
to
send
it.
me all the articles so we can share them with storytellers.
I definitely want to read them as well, because is it time for me to jump in?
Yes, please. You can close us out.
No, I was thinking a lot about, just again, because for the last several months, we've all been thinking so much about the strikes and what's missing. And this is what all of us who do what we do, meaning writers, directors, actors, producers, we don't do it for fame or fortune. That's the last thing in the world we do it for. It doesn't even, it's not even part of the calculus, because it's so uncertain. You really have no idea what the path is going to be, whether you'll ever achieve that success. People often drop out or they have to hang on, whatever. So we do it for the sense of awe, for the passion, for this other ineffable thing that is so hard to describe. And when it gets reduced down to numbers and this and that, it's like, no, we would probably do it, for practically nothing, but we don't want to be completely taken advantage of at the same time. So it's a really funny thing, and awe is at the heart of it. I was going to say this. Okay, I grew up a lot on Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals. So I had a ridiculously naive, I know every song in every one of those shows that came out. And I have, on the one hand, very, very naive sense of happy endings and, everything's going to work out. But within those movies was a sense of awe, was a sense of, oh, something beautiful is going to happen.
Wow.
So fortunately, I grew out of that a little bit, and having seen a lot of movies from the late 60s and 70s, which were very, very influential to me, became a kind of bedrock. And, I had many years working with Oliver Stone, so he clearly, and we just saw JFK together on the big screen. But I would say also even more recently, when films with people of color start emerging, I just saw Lou Diamond Phillips, and I was reminded how when I saw La Bamba, that blew my mind, because I thought, you can make a movie about someone who's great, happens to be a person of color. And that gave me the idea to make a film about Bruce Lee, which Rob Cohen then did, and then later Joy Luck Club, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of been this accordion effect of like looking at the big picture and then finding specific ways to execute change in with means that I have and with particular passion. So being able to see, for instance, the explosion of Asian American talent on screen is incredible, not to mention, African American and so many other marginalized groups, hearing impaired, disabled, whatever. We have so many voices that have not been traditionally heard. And I am very grateful to be in a position where I can just be myself. Like, my point of view is not out of sync with what the world seems to want these days. And it's definitely an inflection point. And, we're all very lucky to be the beneficiaries of so much more. And hearing what you said, Yalda, about the young generation, the Gen Z it is Gen Z, right? is very, very encouraging. So thank you for that research. And thank you, Dacher, for, I'm dying to know more about what you know about awe.
There's a book out.
So, yeah, we will.
Happy to talk to you about it. It'd be an honor.
On the page.
It'd be an honor.
We will, if there's, we'll definitely put that link on our page when we post this.
Perfect.
Thank you both so much. This was our first one, so could not be more honored to kick it off with two amazing scholars and storytellers. And scholars are storytellers and storytellers are scholars. And our next one, hopefully, will have an adolescent as well. We are very, very grateful to both of you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Good
Yalda.
to meet you.
What an honor to meet you, Janet.